welcome to USMNT Weekly on the Total Soccer Show, your one-stop shop for everything related to the national team. On this show, we're heading to the treatment table to check in on the status of some key Americans who are out injured right now or who are coming back into action. And we'll do that before answering some of your questions too. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, your friend, my friend, the Taylor Rockwell is here. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. It is good to have you back. And much like it is good to have you back, it is good to have a lot of these players back playing. I don't know if it's a sign of fixture fatigue for me, if it's a sign of how many other things I've had going on, but I missed the return of a few of these people. I thought a couple of them were still out, so I'm very excited to do this episode and talk about the return of some players who could be quite key for the U.S. going forward.
Likewise, Taylor, very excited to have this conversation, and I'm excited to be back in the fold at Total Soccer Show. I've not been injured this past weekend, but I've been podcast sidelined. I had 3 days, I believe 3 days, where I didn't open my laptop. I don't remember the last time that happened. Incredible, right?
To be fair to you, spending time in Orlando is injurious to your soul. So in that way, you have been slightly injured, and I'm glad to see you back at full capacity.
But in a way that I like.
It's a good kind of pain. All right. How was Orlando, Ryan? What was your favorite thing?
I went to a popular Brazilian restaurant where they serve you until you turn over a card to tell them to stop serving you. And it was wonderful.
We debated this, I think, off air while you weren't here. Do they not have a Fogo de Chao in Charlotte?
No.
Oh,
really?
I had to travel across 4 states to get to one.
That was
glorious. Joe Lowry's here. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Ryan. I am curious about your Fogo de Chao experience. I've been once, and I probably won't go back, but that's not an indictment of your enjoyment of it whatsoever. My beef... See what I did there? My beef with my experience was that I felt like all of the meat was a little bit overcooked. Did you have that experience, or was it cooked to your liking, sir?
It was cooked to my liking. If anything, I would say it was on the rarer side, Joe. Maybe you just had a bad day. Maybe they left them in a little too long for you.
Joe, are you a mid-rare guy?
I don't know. Like, is that medium rare? Is that what that means?
Yeah.
Yeah. Optimal, I think is medium rare. Rare is maybe a little bit too rare, and medium trends towards well a little bit too often. I feel like medium rare is the spot.
And feral Graham, as we all know, just eats it raw.
Correct. Tartar. Yeah. Graham's a tartar, man. Tartan Army, tartar, it's right.
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
He only eats meat that he catches in the woods behind his house, I believe.
Well, that's what the hole is for. Outside the house is just a giant bear trap. It's his bear meat supply.
There you go. Hi, Graham. It's just the three of us on this episode for USMNT Weekly. Graham will be joining us back on the feed soon, of course. Before we get into the USMNT chat and past the Fogo de Chao chat, I'd like to tell you about patreon.com/Total Soccer Show, where you'll find all our bonus content, including bonus episodes of this here podcast, bonus video content, and access to our Discord server where most of the cool kids are hanging out. Nope, getting an update. All the cool kids are hanging out in the Discord server. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. The best way to support us, please, and thank you. And another bit of housekeeping. We're on YouTube. Hey, I'm pointing at my face right now. You know that if you're watching us on YouTube.
It's a nice face.
Yeah, it's been to Florida. It's refreshed.
Does that make it refreshed? I thought that just make it look more haggard.
Well, I didn't go to any theme parks, so I'm not haggard.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Is how I would categorize.
We do have listeners in Florida. Florida listeners, I do apologize. I hope we can still be friends. I don't. You don't. But still, I feel bad. Kind of.
It says when you cross the state line, the sign says "Welcome to the free state of Florida."
That's a separate secessionist part of Florida that has splintered off and formed its own Tallahassee adjacent state where they prioritize, I think, like funnel cake and cotton candy are the two primary food groups of the free state of Florida. Mm-hmm. It's mostly carnival food.
There's an alligator, right?
Centric, yeah. Yes, exactly. Oh, yes, of course, that too.
Very good. Excellent. Glad to hear it. All right, let's get
into
our
I apologize
USMNT
to
Weekly.
Florida. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
We love you. We love you indeed. And it is Graham's spiritual home, lest we forget. Let's move on, shall we? Let's start off, I should say, with the treatment table, some injuries. Is it Taylor, in terms of the general injury picture for the USMNT, is it fair to say it affected the last window pretty significantly?
Let's hope so. That would go a long way towards explaining maybe the lackluster performances and why the U.S. looked disjointed at times. I wouldn't say it was the full explanation, but I do think a lot of the injuries played a big part in it, the fullbacks especially, but also some of the potential striker options and their absence not helping either, and even some of the midfield options, I think, a bit depleted and just maybe lacking some of that competition that could have maybe inspired a bit more fight, a bit more physicality in the team. So it is exciting to have a fair number of these players back and playing, and it's exciting theoretically to have them back and playing for the United States.
Yes, indeed. All right, let's start off with one of those players, Joe. Folarin Balogun, of course, missed much of the season with Monaco with that shoulder surgery. He returned in March. He's back. He's played a few games. What's going on with Balogun?
Yeah, pretty good summary there, Ryan, as far as what's going on with Folarin Balogun. There's good news, obviously, and you said it. He's back to actually getting minutes for Monaco. The bad news is his path to playing time has gotten even murkier. So back in the January transfer window, Monaco went out and signed Micah Beereth up top, and he has been tearing it up for Adi Hütter's team. There's been a lot of Beereth and Brielle Mbolo starting up top together. It's kind of been the story of Balogun at Monaco, is that he gets there and he's not really thriving and doesn't really end up being the go-to guy in that striker spot. Then he gets injured earlier this year, as we've already said. And he'd had that shoulder injury, apparently, even earlier into the fall. He'd been dealing with it, and then he aggravated it in a game in November against Marseille. And then had surgery on it in December and is now really just getting back to playing minutes at all over the last month. So we didn't see him in the March window for the U.S., as Taylor kind of referenced with some of those striker absences. It's going to be an interesting road back for Balogun at Monaco. Now, Monaco are incentivized for him to do well because they paid a lot of money for him in the first place. But they've got other options. And Monaco is a very, very good team in France right now. They're not PSG, but they're putting up some really impressive numbers. I don't know what the future looks like for Folarin Balogun. In the immediate future, it looks like him continuing to get minutes here and there until the end of the season, and then hopefully having some success this summer with the U.S. in a way that benefits his career. But in the, year, 2-year club future horizon, I really don't know what comes next for Balogun.
It's a really tricky situation because his deal takes him through, I think, 2028, the summer of 2028. So he's got a lengthy amount of time left on a deal that does pay him quite well. And to Joe's point, when Monaco bring him in, they pay Arsenal an initial fee of around $25 million with add-ons and other clauses. I'm assuming that has gone up, though with his lack of consistent minutes, maybe it hasn't. But that is a sizable amount of investment for Monaco. So it's unlikely that they're going to recoup that if they were to try to sell him now. So if they were to get rid of him, feels like that would be for a bit of a loss.
Totally.
Maybe that would be the worst thing for him because it might be to a place where he would actually get minutes and be sort of the central figure in the attack. But I am inclined to say it also wouldn't be the worst thing for him to stay there, have a little bit of consistency, even if that means not consistency in minutes, but at the very least, just get some regularity in terms of super substitute minutes, playing in some cup games, starting event like occasional league games, just to get his footing, because it doesn't feel like he's gonna be the subject of transfer rumors and transfer gossip. It doesn't feel like he's done enough, and his injury has prevented him from sort of getting that level of hype. So a move seems unlikely. Being stuck there seems much more likely, and so you have to make the best of what could be a bad situation, because Beereth has come in and set that league alight. What is it, like 13 goals in 12
12
games?
goals in 13 league games, yeah.
Yeah, that is what we had hoped Balogun would do, and instead Beereth has done, and that is not bad for a January transfer signing. So between him and Brielle Mbolo, who we know has been a central figure for Monaco, even with his own injuries, he's added 6 goals and 4 assists in a lengthier amount of time, but those two feel like they will be the strike partnership for the end of this season and likely the beginning of next. So Balogun, I think, will be there, will get minutes, but probably not in the way that we had hoped he would.
I find, Taylor, Brielle Mbolo is an interesting player in himself. I kind of categorize him and Balogun in a similar box, in that Prince that was promised box. I feel like Mbolo, for at least a decade, has been this guy like, he's going to break out any second now, and it hasn't quite happened. Is that fair?
Absolutely fair. I mean, he was one of the original members of the TSS scouting network when we first launched it, because he was a youngster breaking through with, I think, Schalke at the time. I think that's where we picked him up after he moved from Basel, and it felt like he was, to your point, going to be the next big thing. He's tall enough, big enough. He's 6'2". He's got the muscle on him, but he also had some speed. He also had some good finishing ability, and it felt like maybe his sort of downturn in form and injury history coincided with Schalke having their downturn in form. He moves to Gladbach, and that goes okay. He scores some goals. He plays lots of games, but still wasn't really hitting at the level we thought he might. Then he makes that move to Monaco in 2022, I think, and has been there ever since, but has had injuries himself and hasn't really hit that level that maybe we thought he might someday. So it does feel like a good comparison to Balogun, who could very well still hit that level. He's got a few years to do so. Embolo is 28, Balogun not quite there yet. So, could still be some time. I think Balogun would be wise to maybe tread water, continue to work on fitness, and continue to justify selection because Embolo could very well get injured again. We don't know how long Biereth will keep his run of form going, so it feels like there will be opportunities, but it is not a slam dunk. He's walking right back into the team, and everybody can't wait to have him starting again. Americans can, but everybody else may be more inclined to watch the people who've been scoring goals continue to score goals.
Indeed. Got to earn those minutes, Folarin. Keep an eye on that.
Joe, how do you feel about that? Would you agree? Are you okay with him staying there, even if it means he's not starting every single game?
Yeah, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I don't think it's a great situation. That's about the coldest take on the planet. I would not be opposed to seeing him get a loan to a slightly lower level club in France where he's had success in the past so that he can get back into goal-scoring form and actually be playing games before the World Cup. But I think he's still going to get minutes at Monaco. It's just a question of how many minutes, and can he win the battle over Biereth or over Embolo. I don't think that's impossible because I still have a lot of Folarin Balogun stock. I think he's still probably the best number 9 in this U.S. pool. But I think I would not be opposed to seeing him go somewhere else to actually play games if that's not going to be on the table in France.
I think I revert back to the better the devil you know sort of situation of that move could work. He could get a loan. He could get some minutes, but it could also be another loan where he then has somebody ahead of him and he's kind of on the bench and it doesn't work out again and now it's even further disruptive. So I think that's where I am with him. I think your point is well taken, Joe, but I think I am so concerned with his lack of minutes and his lack of fitness this season that I would happily take him staying fit, even if it means fewer minutes next year.
Hear me out. Wrexham.
Hear me out.
Right? Aging. Hear me out, I said.
Oh, my bad.
Hear me out, Joe. Thank you. Forward line, Paul Mullin and Ollie Palmer not getting any younger. Young US talent with a North American ownership group. I feel like he could get spotlighted there and really have some impact in the championship. Is that so wrong, Joe?
Yep.
All right.
Is the championship where we want a player with an injury history to go to stay healthy? Because that feels like maybe a physical and fixture slog that he might not survive.
And he plays 70 really hard games a year, too.
Okay, all right. Most of them in the mud. Let's make it happen.
All right. Maybe I'll park that one. But anyway, food for thought for Folarin Balogun. Why don't we move on to one of the players who's maybe the most key absence from the USMNT in recent months, Sergino Dest. Obviously, like Balogun, long-term absence from the field. He had that ACL tear, but he did, Taylor, return, of course, in March, but wasn't fit for the most recent window. But he's back to playing, right?
Yes, he is. I mean, for the most part, yeah. He returned from that long-term injury, which he's been out so long that I forgot what it was briefly, and I couldn't remember if it was Achilles or ACL. Ryan, correct with the ACL. Returns on March 8th, gets 23 minutes, comes on for Richie Ledesma, who could still represent the USMNT, but could also represent Mexico at this point. And Ledesma has been deputizing in Dest's absence, and that's sort of been the rotation since Dest's return. Dest is an unused substitute against Arsenal in the Champions League when PSV go out. Ledesma starts that game. Dest starts their next 2 league games, but then picks up another injury. He's been out since that knock in early April. The reporting is that he should be back sooner rather than later, but it is also reporting that has reported it as an ankle injury. I think one site said it was an aggravation of a knee injury and then said, no, that's not correct. Then there have been muscle reporting of a calf injury, a thigh injury. So it's been mixed in terms of what the injury actually is. Joe, I don't know if you have more information on that one. I've been a little bit confused, but it does seem like it is not a significant injury, just maybe a phantom one that is keeping him out of the team.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I have. Hopefully Dest will be back sooner rather than later. Because to go back to, Ryan, your initial question, which I think was a great one about how did these injuries really impact the U.S. in the March window, I feel much more strongly than Taylor that the injuries played a huge part in the U.S. looking so poor in that window. Missing 2 very, very important starters in Dest and Jedi Robinson for that window before you even get to the number 9 situation. That hurts a lot in basically every phase for the U.S., and Dest's absence, I think, was really felt in games where the U.S. needed to be the protagonists. So hopefully for Dest, he gets back on the field, plays a little bit before the end of the league season for PSV, and then is ready to go for those friendlies that the U.S. has in June against Switzerland and Turkey, and right into the Gold Cup from there. I think he's probably on track for that, but with what Taylor said, and I echo this, it's not a lot of clarity around what his current injury issue is, but it does not seem to be really related to that ACL tear, nor does it seem to be a long-term thing.
I mean, I think with where we are in the season, it could also be that there is just a slightly more maybe conservative approach from PSV. As I said, they're already out of the Champions League. Maybe they want to kind of make sure that he stays fully fit and healthy. They are 9 points back of Ajax at present. They do have a game in hand, so they could close that gap. They could end up maybe challenging for the title, but it does seem like they're kind of okay with the situation in which Richie Ledesma continues to play. Dest starts when he is fully fit, but if he feels a knock, if it feels like something could go wrong, maybe they're inclined to give him a rest to let him get the summer and then come back fully fit and raring to go next year when they can even more properly challenge for the title.
Yeah, so just keeping him fit for that summer with the USMNT is what the
well, I think the goal, of course, with every club is to keep him fully fit until the penultimate game of the season, in which you start him, then he gets injured, then you have to keep him out of the summer with the national team so that he can be fully fit for the preseason. So I look forward to Dest's injury on the second to last game of the season. It should be fun.
Is he the most significant absence from the USMNT at this point, Taylor?
Unless Jedi Robinson isn't playing, yes. I think it's Jedi and Dest. I think those two can do for the fullback position what no one else in the camp can do and no one else in the pool can do. I would probably say Jedi is the most important player on the team right now, but Dest, I think I took him first when we did our draft with my third pick, but I took him in the first round because I think he can be so instrumental to how the U.S. wants to attack down that right side, how they can overwhelm, how they can also get numbers centrally because he can move into that space as well. So I think having him fully fit, raring to go, is only going to make the U.S. better. Joe, I think you are probably correct to say that the injuries were the biggest difference maker or the biggest way of explaining why the U.S. looks so poor. I just keep going back to that lack of effort. And it feels like with some of those players out, there could have been, or that lack of fight, or perceived lack of fight. And it could have been an opportunity for players to be like, here we go, I can stake my claim. Maybe Pochettino just told them before the game, like, doesn't matter what you guys do, none of you are starting. That's probably what he did, and that's probably why they look so lethargic. But that's the only reason why I continue to be more concerned about things other than just the injuries.
All right. Well, let's stick on those injuries when we come back after this break, and we're also going to answer some of your questions. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. Joe, we're still on the treatment table. Let's head to Ricardo Pepi, who I believe is very much a resident of that table out for the rest of the season. What's the deal with Pepi?
Yeah, he's got his imprint. You sit in a chair long enough and you leave an imprint when you get up. That's Pepi on the table right now. It's just an outline of Ricardo Pepi on that table. Yeah, still out, as you said, Ryan, meniscus surgery back in early February. The real question for Pepi is, can he be back by June? Or will he be involved at all for the U.S. this summer? I don't know. I don't know the answer for that. We haven't really gotten an update on his injury timeline outside of the initial batch of reporting and stuff from PSV that said, yeah, he is going to miss the rest of their season. I don't know what's going to happen with Pepi. I very much hope that he's back for the U.S. come the summer because he was, if we remember, in a really interesting spot with PSV where he was scoring a bunch of goals, was getting key minutes. That injury that he suffers comes in the Champions League against Liverpool. He's playing big minutes and a huge role for PSV, even with the ghost of Luke de Jong, who's not actually a ghost, still actually around the team. So I don't know. I don't know what comes next for Pepi at the club level. Will teams now be skittish when it comes to making offers for him this summer? Because if we remember, West Ham had already made a $25 million bid for him, according to reports from Goal and I think other outlets as well. And teams wanted Ricardo Pepi. I think there was a real chance that he would have moved this summer. Will that happen? Will teams not want to make a move for Pepi after this sort of surgery and they'll be more content now that he's not top of mind to go after some other targets who have been playing in recent months? Or will they make a move anyway? And Pepi's going to have to then reestablish himself at a new club before the World Cup. In some ways, this is a similar situation to Balogun in that both of them aren't playing and there are questions about where their future lies. Pepi is undoubtedly in the better position in that he's playing for a club that is so good. I mean, Monaco are good at this too, but PSV are so good at moving players through. And Pepi's been excellent for them, right? He's been very, very good, granted against lower quality opposition. But I'm fascinated to see what this summer looks like for Pepi, both with the U.S. and then what comes next for him at club level.
It does seem like if he had kept his form going, even with Luke de Jong there, and if Pepi didn't get injured, there would be some speculation or some kind of transfer talking for
No doubt.
for Pepi this year. What's the word I'm looking for here? But I think teams would be interested basically because of what he did in the league, how good he started to look, and how like much of a clever poacher, but then also a facilitator he started to look for PSV. And so to have him injured probably is a good thing for them because they'll hold on to him this summer most likely, unless somebody still comes in. I am interested in what that means for him for the national team, however, because they ruled him out, PSV, for the rest of the season. He has the surgery on the meniscus. Meniscus surgeries can be invasive, can take longer to recover from, but can also be a much shorter window, certainly, than an ACL tear. So that he is out for the rest of the season tells me it was a pretty significant meniscus tear, like maybe a full tear where it folds over and has to be restored and stitched down and held in place and all that fun stuff. But then if he's recovering from injury in time for the summer, do you then, if you're PSV, are you cool with him going? Obviously, they have to be okay with him if the U.S. calls, but I do wonder if that's a time when Pochettino is going to roll the dice and want everybody in camp because he wants to see what the U.S. looks like at full strength, or does he, as national team managers sometimes do, think, I'll have Balogun, I'll have Sargent, I can try somebody else there, I'll give Pepi the summer and a preseason with his club, and then I can call him in September, October. I don't think I would love that, but at the same time, I don't know if you want to bring in somebody who hasn't played since January or February, at least at competitive level, and then expect them to be at the level everybody else is at. It feels like it would be a tough task. Maybe that's where we're at as a national team, but I'm a bit conflicted about what that could mean for him for this summer.
Assuming, Taylor, all the forwards are at peak health this summer, where does Pepi, where does Balogun fit in the depth chart for you at the moment? And you can factor in the fact that they may not have been had a lot of minutes leading into the summer.
So when we did the draft, when we did our respective teams, I took Pepi with my second pick. I took him over Balogun, but that was for my team and the way I wanted my team to play. For Pochettino, I think it is probably still a 1A, 1B, and then a gap. Maybe 2 has a question mark, and then 3 is Sargent? Ajamang? I'm not sure.
That's pretty apt.
But I think it's still those 2. I would put Balogun probably slightly ahead just because he has been ahead for the U.S. Under Berhalter. Certainly hasn't gotten any looks at Pochettino, but I think if Pochettino is talking to U.S. staff, if he is relying on U.S. scouting reports and the like, I have a feeling Balogun has the edge coming into camp. But it does feel like one where if they're both there fully fit, it is going to be whomever impresses more, whomever adjusts to the system more. That's what Pochettino has wanted. He's want players who can adjust to his tactics, adjust to the match itself, adjust to the game state. So whoever does that better, I think is going to be the number one. I give the edge to Balogun right now, but I personally have a bit more faith in Pepi to do some of what Pochettino is asking.
Joe, does that align with your thinking?
No.
I mean, kind of. Honestly, my answer is I don't know. Right? I've held on to my Folarin Balogun stock, and I think he's still a very good player. Pepi has been more productive, but it wasn't in a starting role, and it's in a worse league. Mm-hmm. Pepi has gotten time for the U.S. under Pochettino. Balogun hasn't because of the timing of his injuries. If I had to go out there and play a must-win game tomorrow, and both these guys are magically 90 minutes fit, I would probably still go with Balogun, but that could be a bad call on my part. Like, I am very willing to be swayed one way or the other on this. I don't know that there's a ton that separates these guys. I do think it seemed clear that Pepi's trajectory was different than Balogun's prior to these injuries. And that's why, again, I'm just so curious to see what the next phase will look like for both of these guys. Because it seems like maybe for the first time in a while, we could be, I don't know, like 6 months away from some clarity on the striker spot. We're always 6 months away from being 6 months away. But I don't know, man. It's like picking a favorite child, but they're also neither one's my real favorite. I don't know.
We're always 6 months away from being 6 months away.
Well, we always talk about we're about to learn who the number 9 is. Balogun goes to Monaco, and I'm thinking, wow, this is going to be great for him. It's going to be great for the U.S. And then all of a sudden, it's not great for anybody, and we never get the clarity that we're actually looking for. So it feels like it's always right around the corner, and then you get to that corner, and you realize that there's another corner.
I think to speak to what Joe is saying, I think this connects. Like, I am conflicted about what I've said about like Balogun and Dest and Pepi, really, about if they're returning from injury but they're not at that like full sharpness, do you call them in this summer or do you give them a little bit more time to get back to 100% so they feel themselves when they do come into camp? Do we have the time to give them that luxury, or do we need to have our full team, our best team playing right now? The conventional wisdom, the standard answer would be they've got to be in there. We need our best team with our best players, even if they're only at 90%. We need to see how this team functions. And I would love to be the person who says that definitively. They've got to be in there. We've got to start drawing the line. We've got to make this clear. But if you then talk to the person, because they are a human, lest we forget, and they say, like, yeah, I still feel like really just not at my best. I don't feel sharp. I don't feel ready. Who am I to be like, tough, get in there and play harder? Like, I don't know. I don't want to be that guy. But I think I still am in that situation where that leads to I hope they can be back in there. I want them to play, but I don't know if they'll be able to. I don't know if they'll be fully fit, but I have a lot of faith in them when they are fully fit, but I'm not sure if that faith is warranted, and it's a fun cycle of murkiness and haze in which the U.S. has existed since, I don't know, 2022, 2017, who knows?
I've been in that haze as well since that period, so let's be fair about it. Yeah.
But that's just called the international window for you, I think.
Yeah, get me back to Florida. Let's talk about a few more players potentially in or out of the treatment table. Taylor, Anthony Robinson, he's out of the woods at this point, right?
Yeah. Yes, we're not even sure what woods he was in.
Correct.
I think. Yeah, exactly.
I think he just lightly grazed a tree and then moved right back to England and moved on.
My tendons are swollen from grazing that tree. That seems to be what the reporting was, is that he had, one report at least was that he had tendinopathy, I don't know. But basically inflamed tendons in his knee, likely due to overuse because they play 4 million minutes a season now. And so maybe Fulham wanted to keep him and rest him for the run-in. Maybe Pochettino, again, was kind of okay with not calling in a player to keep good relations with the club, or maybe just felt like, it's the Nations League, we'll be fine. That wasn't the case. But either way, nothing major. Jedi back playing, captaining Fulham, looking his usual self. So he does seem to be out of the woods, even if he was maybe never in the woods to begin with. Who knows? It's a confusing metaphor.
And I'm right there with you, Taylor. That whole situation in March was weird, where he's on the roster and then withdraws with an undisclosed medical thing. We don't really know what's going on there. While we're on the topic of left backs, let me toss in 3 other left backs who are sort of in and around this team that have gotten back to playing games. John Tolkien is back to starting after a thigh injury. He started the last 3 for Holston Kiel, who are in the midst of a battle to avoid auto relegation. They're going to be in that bottom 3 regardless. It's just a question of where they're going to be in the bottom 3, so grab your popcorn there, folks. Kevin Paredes played his first game of the season for Wolfsburg after recovering from a long-term foot injury. I think he missed 11 months for Wolfsburg. He got 60 minutes in their 2-2 draw against Mainz over the weekend. It's a great step for him. I like Paredes still as a player. I think there is maybe a place for him in this team at some point, probably not before 26, but maybe, you don't know. And then Caleb Wiley has been back to starting games over the last month for Watford. He'd been dealing with a shoulder injury when he was over in France and has had some spells in and out of the lineup since he's moved to England. So good news there on the left back front. Now it's up to one of these guys to actually go out there and prove that they should be the backup to Jedi.
Joe, okay, if John Tolkien gets relegated with Holstein Kiel, so they're now in the Zweite Bundesliga, if Kevin Paredes is kind of doing his usual, starting some games, maybe subbing in some games and sitting some games, and then Caleb Wiley is starting for Watford next season, which of those 3 do you have the most comfort in being the deputy for Jedi?
Probably still John Tolkien, because I think I like him most as a player. I think he's got the highest floor of those 3 guys, where you put him on the field and you're not necessarily going to get the same attacking output in the final third as the other guys, but you're going to get good set-piece service. You're going to largely get effective defensive play. Even though he's not a like-for-like profile-wise with Jedi, Paredes and Wiley are much closer to how Jedi Robinson plays on the left side than John Tolkien is. But Tolkien is, I think, the safest of those 3 guys, even though he's got that wild streak to him, perhaps both on and off the field. But I think I would lean Tolkien.
I just can't tell which one is more of a second division black hole, the championship or the Zweite Bundesliga. It feels like both of them, once a player goes in there, they're maybe less likely to get looks. It seems like Zweite Bundesliga is the one where you're going to get fewer looks from the U.S. national team. You get your Haji Wrights, your Josh Sargents still getting opportunities for the U.S. Fewer for, I don't know, anybody in that second division who might still be there, but I don't know.
I also think this is a good launch point just to say briefly. I believe this pretty strongly. It's not just about club form and the level that you're playing at. It's also about who you are as a player, as to whether or not you should get called in. And I know that's a pretty obvious thing to say, but the thing I always think about is Tim Weah, when he is the best attacker for the U.S. during World Cup qualifying leading into 2022. he was not effective for his club really in that stretch and wasn't getting consistent minutes in the same position he was playing for the U.S. And yet he was still very, very effective for long stretches for the U.S. men's national team. I think if you have a comfort as a player, if you have seen them operate at a higher level, just because John Tolkien goes down to the second Bundesliga doesn't mean that he's suddenly a worse player, right? He might not be getting the same level of reps. He won't be getting the same level of reps, and that probably limits his progression as a player. But it's the same anywhere, right? Just because Messi moves to Inter Miami doesn't mean that now Messi suddenly is like 4 levels worse than he was when he played with PSG, right? He might be worse because he's getting older, and John Tolkien might not get as much better because he's not getting those same reps. But it's not as simple as the light switch just flips and all of a sudden you shouldn't be in consideration. And I think that's something that is important for U.S. fans to remember, because they don't have the luxury of just turning up their nose at somebody because they're playing in a league that is not the Premier League, or just because they're not playing every single week in and week out for their club teams.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think fans should turn their nose up at anybody. However, I do think that the league has an impact. Maybe not short term, but long term. I think if you're playing a season in the Bundesliga versus a season in the Zweite Bundesliga, there is just going to be more intensity in those games. There's going to be more pressure to compete and win. I mean, like, everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to win every game. Don't get me wrong. But in the Bundesliga, I mean literally like actual pressure in terms of the amount of time you have to process, the amount of time you have to play a ball, how quickly you need to play. I do think as you get sort of weaker leagues, you get more time in your decision making, or you have fewer players around you who can play at the technical level that might be required. So then maybe you're going long more often. Maybe you're giving the ball away more often, and that becomes a norm. And I think it can erode a little bit in the way the player is performing, or it can lower the demand, lower the expectation, and make it maybe easier to exist in that sphere. Not saying that always happens, but I do think that is the reason why we want our players playing in the best possible league, and why once they drop down, it gets a little bit more of a concern, for me at least. But at the same time, I'm with you, Joe, that if Jedi is hurt, I don't have a full confidence in any one of those 3 options. It does feel like John Tolkien was the most likely deputy there, so I wouldn't be like, well, no, he's in the Zweite Bundesliga, he's done. But I would have more concerns than I do right now.
All right, Joe, before we close up the injury report, anyone else you wanted to include?
Yeah, quickly, I guess we can round out the PSV bunch. Malik Tillman is back after injuring his ankle in January. He's played the last 3 games for PSV. Goals in each of his last 2 games, which were both starts, so good sign for him. He was not a part of that March window for the U.S., but I imagine will be in consideration for the summer. And then the only other name is Johnny Cardoso, who was one of the other players that had to withdraw in that March window for the U.S. He was named to the roster, but had just suffered a muscle strain against Las Palmas, like right before that roster was announced, essentially. He had to withdraw and has since gotten back to starting for Betis, so no real issues there. He's another guy who I think we'll probably see this summer.
All right, good stuff. Thank you very much, Joe and Taylor. We take one more quick break. When we come back, we're answering your listener questions. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. We got a few of your questions have come in here, including this one from Mr. Paul Nichols, who says, if there was a 5-a-side tournament played between all the states in the United States, who would win? Players have to have been born in the state to represent it. Ooh, good question, Joe. First off, Joe, how's Arizona doing in this thing?
The Fighting Richie Ledesmas are going all the way, baby. Get out of the way. We're going to steamroll you. No, we're probably not doing great. As much as we would like to, as a state, have a rivalry with California, it's not really a rivalry. I don't think Arizona will be going far in this, but I think there are a few states that have a legitimate chance to go out there and win. Now, it depends a little bit on if we're looking present day or if we're looking to the past as well. I do have some select U.S. legends on these teams. I'm happy to have these chalked off if the council so decides. I gotta be honest, guys. I think teams are gonna have a pretty hard time beating New York, which I think is where I landed on this, especially if you are leaning present day. The other top line contenders, I think California is a real contender here. I think New Jersey is a real contender here.
Yep.
I think Texas and Illinois have a little bit of juice, and Washington actually has an unexpected amount of juice because apparently Weston McKennie was born there, and I did not know that. I always thought he was born in Texas. He's not.
Oh, me too.
He was born in Washington. So, California, New Jersey, New York, maybe Illinois, maybe Texas, maybe Washington, but New York, some of the current day players that are playing. Tyler Adams, who I don't think is a real asset in a 5-a-side game, if I'm being totally honest. Not in the same way he would be in an 11v11 game. Still a high-level professional player. Yunus Musa, Tim Weah, who I think is the five-a-side player next to Sergino Dest in the current U.S. pool, and Dest is ineligible for this question. Joe Scally, Folarin Balogun, Mark McKenzie, James Sands. There's a lot of Jack McGlynn. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great pick. There's a lot of present-day talent that's come out of New York, which is as it should be. I think that's a surprise to no one. Taylor, on your list, did anybody beat the fighting Tyler Adamses here?
No, and I think Tyler Adams would be good in five-a-side, Joe. But I think you are correct in your short list there, because if you go California with their present group, you would have Aaron Long, Luca De La Torre, the Roldan brothers, Haji Wright, Diego Luna could be in there too. I think I gave you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 names in there.
Yeah, so I'm just naming people. It's all good.
You could make a five-a-side team out of that one that would be pretty solid. And then New Jersey, I think Michael Bradley is just a little bit too past it, but if we had to, maybe we could throw him in there. But with present players, you've got Alejandro Bedoya, Matt Miazga, the Aronson brothers, Matt Turner, John Tolkien, Johnny Cardoso. So you've got plenty in there. And then if you went all-time, I'm giving the edge to Jersey, because then you've got Claudio Reyna, John Harkes, Greg Berhalter, Tim Howard, Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore. That's pretty good. Giuseppe Rossi. You could toss in Tony Miola if you need a backup goalie, or you want him and Tim Howard to fight over who's going to be your five-a-side goalie if you're having a goalie in five-a-side. But New Jersey all-time, present-day New York, honorable mentions to some of the states you've already mentioned, Joe, but then also Missouri for Tim Ream and Josh Sargent, and Alabama for Chris Richards and Tanner Tessman.
Yeah, it's a good pick. Illinois grabbed my attention here as well. They got Brian McBride and Steve Cherundolo going back in time a little, and Marcelo Balboa as well. Then present day Georgie and Brian Gutierrez are also in Illinois, from Illinois. I was tempted by that. I think you can build the bones of a really good Texas team, and there's lots of names that didn't get on my list here. But Dempsey, of course, Keaton Parks, I think would be a sneaky good five-a-side player. Ricardo Pepi from El Paso, Kellen Acosta. There's the bones of a pretty good squad there. California, I think, can do a bit of rivalrying of New Jersey, even when you expand it to look back. They get Landon Donovan, which helps a lot. And a Landon Donovan, Diego Luna, Luca De La Torre led five-a-side team. I just think about the profiles of those players. When I want a five-a-side team, I think you want guys who have great close control, who can beat you 1v1. The spaces are tighter, which means they need to be really good in tight spots. It's an obvious thing. But I think California has maybe more players that are perfect for that than any other state at the highest levels. If you could get Donovan and Luna especially combining like in near goal in a five-a-side game, and then maybe Christian Roldan as your like token defensive-ish kind of player.
Oh, Moe Du could be in there, man. Moe Du with California
that's a good pick.
Well. Yeah.
All right, so now we're cooking with gas. But if we're looking at present day, I think New York is pretty tough to beat.
Agreed.
Nice. All right, Paul Nichols, thank you very much.
That feels like such a disappointing answer though. Like New York and California, it's like that feels right, but also like I wanted it to be Illinois or Indiana or something. I didn't want
Wyoming's secret soccer talent factory. More at 10.
I did a lot of trying to make Virginia work. Unfortunately, not quite at that level these days.
Yeah. Who's Virginia's best, Taylor? Do you know?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, like right now, like maybe Eric Williamson. That's.
Oh, nice.
I forget who else is from here. To be honest, historically, there's plenty of very good people from Virginia, but present, I think it's a lot more like MLSers than it is world class internationals.
Well, we'll get Richie Ledesma and Bryce Duke out on the field, and we'll meet your guys behind the barn at 6, and we'll see who wins.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
Wow, behind the barn.
I don't know.
Chris Durkin? You want a Chris Durkin in there? Does that do it for you? He's from Richmond.
Yeah, that's cool.
Don't give me your faux enthusiasm.
No, dude, I don't have anything more on my side. So,
Paul Nichols, thank you very much for that question. Let's go to Nick Hartman, who says, if you were forced to play a back three in the Gold Cup this summer, who would that preferred back three be? And a related question, would you rather start Zimmerman or Maloney in the middle of the three if you had to play one of them? Taylor, what are we thinking here?
We're thinking that I misread the question and thought I had to include one of those two, so I went with Maloney, mostly because I just want to see if that could actually work. I have no idea if it could, but Leonard Maloney is a player that I've been convinced could do things for the United States with no sample size behind it. He makes the move from Heidenheim to Mainz. We talked about maybe he would be a better center back than defensive midfielder because we don't know how good he would actually be on the ball for the United States. But I think for his defensive action, he does have the defensive work rate as well. I think I would lean him just because I think it could be an exciting new addition. Not that Walker Zimmerman wouldn't be, but we've seen him for the U.S. before. I still think he could be one of the best center backs in the pool at present because options are limited. But for the what-if potential of Leonard Maloney, I would throw him in there. And then I had Tim Ream to his left and Chris Richards to his right.
I like the Maloney shout, Taylor. You've completely swayed me there. I had Zimmerman as my actual answer to that second part of the question, just because he's actually played there, right? And is go ahead.
And it would be Zimmerman if you were actually doing this, because I'm not even sure Mauricio Pochettino knows Leonard Maloney exists. I'm not sure U.S. Soccer knows Leonard Maloney exists. Leonard Maloney, I'm pretty sure knows he exists, but we don't have confirmation on that one yet.
We don't.
But yeah,
Poch thinks he's a World War II fighter pilot. That's what he said.
It's either that or like a turn of the century boxer. It's one or the other.
Or
and by
I
turn
could
of the
see,
century, I mean 1800s to 1900s, not
100%.
1900s to 2000s.
Yeah, no gloves. I could see Pochettino having heard the name once, Leonard Maloney, and thought that someone said Lemon Maloney, and actually the name has stuck with him weirdly. So maybe Poch thinks about Lemon Maloney quite a bit. I would be curious to see Maloney in a back three. My big concern with him, especially in a Gold Cup situation, right, where the U.S. is going to have a bunch of the ball. The Gold Cup draw was a week or two ago at this point. They're going to have a ton of possession in those games. Maloney is in the first percentile, that's the bottom, not the top, among central midfielders in Europe's Big Five leagues and the Europa League and Champions League also included in there, in progressive passes per 90 minutes among midfielders. He doesn't move the ball forward, and I think in basically any game where the U.S. needs that is not ideal. I think there could be a game in which Maloney is a really good fit as a center back, but ultimately none of that matters. I agree with Taylor. I'd be curious to see what this would actually look like in a real game and get some actual data on all of this. My back three of choice, I don't think will surprise people that have been listening somewhat regularly to these U.S. shows. I would have Mark McKenzie on the right side of my trio. I would have Richards in the middle, and I would have Ream on the left. Again, these are Gold Cup games. If this is a game against a much higher powered attacking foe, I'm thinking a lot harder about putting Tim Ream in the starting lineup because I'm worried about the giant chasm that's going to pop up between Jedi Robinson as he pushes forward and Ream trying to defend the edge on that left side. But I don't really think anybody has surpassed those players, right? That's been a complete stall for the U.S. player pool since the 22 World Cup. It's Tim Ream brought back in for that tournament, and you think, okay, that's nice. Like this will be kind of his last hurrah. And then zero young center backs have gone and done anything. Jalen Neal was a name, and he's gotten traded to the worst team in Major League Soccer from, I guess, the other worst team in Major League Soccer. Like nothing has progressed. Banks hasn't really stayed in the headlines in the same way over in Germany. Nobody has stepped into that role. And I think I still trust those three players more than I trust, say, a Zimmerman or a Robinson or a Trusty or a CCV. But honestly, and this doesn't make for great, really thought-provoking audio, I think about the center back pool a lot in the same way I think about the striker pool between Pepi and Balogun and the left back spot after Jedi Robinson, which is just that I don't think there's a lot that separates these players from each other. So if I really have to decide, I'm going with those three guys because I think they're the best. But are they really? It's hard to say.
This is where we are when it comes to the center back pool. This is a real question. That is obviously not a real question, Joe. But like, if you had Tim Ream and then the doctors from U.S. Cycling when Lance Armstrong was around, would you feel better about starting Tim Ream? Like, if we knew that we were replacing his blood cells and that maybe he just had a little bit more lung capacity, maybe he was going to run that little bit further, that little bit faster.
Yeah,
would you then feel better?
Get that guy on the horse placenta diet. Like
Right.
I'm all about that. No problems there. The only other part of this, and I know
Right,
we
we
got
might
one more
have
question.
mentioned Diego Costa this week.
Yeah, it came out. I learned some things. So I got a nice history lesson. The other thing about this, I love this question, by the way, because it makes us think differently about players in the U.S. pool. I think a lot of people, and I'm not saying that Nick is coming at it from this direction, a lot of people are dropping takes like the U.S. should play with a back three. And I just don't understand that. I don't understand that whatsoever. And again, I know that's not the question. Why would you want to put another player on the field from a weak position group? Like we need to reshape the U.S. lineup to get Mark McKenzie on the field? Like that makes, or to get Joe Scally playing as a right-sided center back so that they can play with Dest. To me, and I'm not saying that that's the prevailing thought of the Total Soccer Show, but we've had questions from folks. People talk about this on social media. People talk about this on other shows. And that just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, if it was a clear, wow, we need to be more defensively solid play, okay, maybe. The U.S.'s defensive play has been their backbone for the entire last, World Cup cycle and change, right? The last World Cup cycle and this one. So 2 cycles now, basically. I don't think we need to optimize the defensive play. I think that's already pretty far along, at least relative to the attacking stuff. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I would be really surprised if Pochettino rolled out a bunch of back threes this summer and beyond because the talent's just not there.
It's why Maloney as a center back has immediate appeal, but then also is sort of itself an obvious drawback, because I think the idea of you go with a back three, but you make one of them a central midfielder, the idea theoretically would be then that you have a back three that can step a little bit higher, that it can gauge higher up, but also have a player in Leonard Maloney or whomever the center midfielder might be, who is then more comfortable on the ball, more capable in possession. And so instead of it being like with Michael Bradley in 2014, where he is dropping between the center backs, but they're deeper, they're further back, you're taking a midfielder out of the center of the pitch, you have a midfielder within the defense, but that defense is pushed further up. The immediate drawback of that cycle is that Leonard Maloney seems to not be as good in possession. His pass completion rates are, at least with progressive passes, are limited. And so then there's the immediate, like, okay, but then aren't you just putting a guy in there to be a center back who might not be good as a like passing center back? And so you kind of run into the same conundrum. It's why I would be okay with experimenting there. But to Joe's point, I don't think it necessarily makes the team better. I'm not even sure if it makes them more defensively solid, especially when Joe Scally stays home, Jedi goes forward. That's kind of a back three. So it's there a little bit already, but I share the concern of adding another defender to balance out the group weakens you elsewhere on the pitch for sure.
Nick Hartman, thank you very much indeed for your question. Let's do one final one for this episode from Ian Brady. Could you see the US getting grouped in the World Cup? Grouped as a verb. Using ELO rankings, not perfect given qualifying and opponent restrictions. I think in pot one, they could get groups like these: Italy, Morocco, and Poland or Sweden, Uruguay, Senegal, and Australia, or Iran, Scotland, and Georgia. Joe, what do we think about this? I don't know how I feel about using grouped as a verb. I don't know how I feel about ELO rankings. I think Electric Light Orchestra should stick to the music, frankly.
Agreed.
But what do you think about the idea of perhaps the US not getting out of its group next
I
summer?
love grouped as a verb, first of all. I think it's great. Also, I'm not scared about Georgia. Like, they didn't come up in our state rankings at all, so I'm not worried about them.
They could have. I think Zimmerman is from there.
Yeah. I mean,
They've
come on,
got a
he's not
couple
even
extra.
starting over Maloney. Let's get real. Before I try to answer this question, because this got me a little bit. Like, this one was a thought-provoking process. Before I thought about answering this question, I wanted to go back and figure out what you need to do to get out of the group. Right? That feels like a good place to start. How many points do you need to advance from a tournament in this format? And the reality is here, there's 12 groups. The top two teams from each group advance, along with the 8 best third-place teams. So that's the metric here. 32 teams make it out over the 48 teams. Ryan, Professor Bailey has entered the chat. So based on the last 3 Euros and the last 2 AFCONs, which have had the exact same format, just with half the number of total teams, right? So instead of 12 groups, they've got 6 groups, but the same process goes, right? The top 2 teams from each group and the half best third-place teams, so half of the total number of groups. Those third-place teams make it out. Based off of those 5 tournaments with the exact same format, you can get out of your group, and you will get out of your group with 3 points, as long as you don't have a negative goal differential. You might even be able to have a -1 or -2 goal differential and still make it out with 3 points. Could be 3 draws, could be 1 win. That's the bar. The bar is 3 points to get out of a group in the World Cup next summer. That's where it's set. So with that context in mind, I don't think it is likely at all that the U.S. gets grouped. Now, it's not impossible, right? But the U.S. will miss all of those top-tier teams, you'd have to imagine. So no Spain, no Argentina, France, England, Brazil, Germany, Portugal, right? You're not getting those teams. Pot 2 will be difficult no matter what. I think Ian gets at that well with some of the groups that are posited here. Colombia could be in there, Uruguay, Italy, Croatia, Japan. I mean, there's good teams in that second pot. And the U.S. right now, I don't know if they would be a pot 2 team. I don't think they would be a pot 2 team. So really, those teams should be better than the U.S. That's not a huge shock. That's going to be a tough game. Pot 3 and Pot 4 are winnable games, in my mind. I think about Wales or Scotland if they're there. I mean, South Korea, Chile, Panama, Peru. There's some pretty weak teams in that group. Not all those teams are at the same level, right? I think the European teams almost always tend to be a bit stronger. South Korea is a danger. I'm not really worried about those last few teams that I mentioned, and those are, again, based off the ELO ratings that Ian mentions in the question. So, yeah, you could get a brutal draw and end up with Senegal and Sweden as your Pot 3 and Pot 4 teams. And you could be in a tough spot. But even then, all you need is 3 points. And you get 3 bites of the apple. I don't see the U.S. getting grouped. Is it impossible? No. But again, is it likely? I don't think it's likely at all.
Yep. Agree entirely. I don't think it's likely either. The only thing, because Joe's covered the ground really, really well. Well done, Joe. The only thing I would add is just that I go back to what is the identity of this team and does it understand itself? Because I think historically, U.S. teams going into World Cups knew that their backs were against the wall, knew that they were going to be the underdog, knew that it was going to take everybody fighting together, defending together, counterattacking at blistering speed, and then getting back and defending again against certain opposition, against stronger opposition. I think that could still work for the U.S. I don't know if they have that mentality. I don't know if they have that sort of, we all have to work our socks off defensively or we're going to lose this game. I think sometimes there is that, like, yeah, but we could be a world-class team. Let's go out there and try stuff. And I think that tends to occur on an individual level than what the coach is actually telling them level. But that lack of identity is the only thing that makes me concerned. I think in the past, I would have had no concerns about the U.S. Getting grouped. This time around, I think if the mentality is wrong, if they are trying to be open and expansive against teams that desperately want them to be open and expansive, that would make me a little bit worried about that goal difference that Joe mentioned. But that feels like a thing that can be figured out, should be ironed out. With what we're paying Pochettino, absolutely should be ironed out by the time the World Cup begins. So I think getting grouped is very unlikely, but there is that just lingering concern in there because you never want to be overly confident heading into a competition.
What if, Taylor, the group is the one that Ian suggests, that first one, Italy, Morocco, let's say Sweden? Are you not sweating a bit there?
I don't know, to be honest, because I haven't seen Italy in some time be consistently good. They're very good in the Euros and then not good at the World Cup, so who knows? Or not even at the World Cup. I mean, yes, all three of them make me nervous in different ways. I think Sweden would be a big old challenge to beat. Poland less so. Morocco, we know, can spring a surprise. And I think Morocco would be the type of team that I would be most concerned about because I think that's the one where the U.S. might think we can control this game, we can have possession. But I think Morocco has better difference makers at the top level and probably also better collective spirit, at least based on the last World Cup. So that would make me very nervous. I just don't think that group is particularly likely, to be perfectly honest. I think Morocco could very well find themselves in the same pot as a Poland or a Sweden. So I feel like we would be more likely to get an African team or a lower South American team in a group like that, which would make me less concerned.
Yeah. I think besides Qatar at 2022, has a host been grouped before?
South Africa is the first.
South Africa. Okay.
Yeah, I was concerned about it in 94. I remember. Even as a 10-year-old, I was like, wait, what? We could be the first ones? But we made it out. In your face.
Well, and like now it's going to be even harder to get grouped because you have all those third place teams getting out. Like again, you're only cutting out 1/3 of the teams in the entire group stage, which is ridiculous as a competitive format. It's terrible as a competitive format. But that's the reality, and it's very friendly to the U.S. You factor in the fact that they are going to be playing in front of big crowds on home soil. That stuff does matter. Exactly how much, it's pretty much impossible to say, but that does matter. And the likelihood of the U.S. getting, I forget what the TSS terminology is on group of death, whether we can use that term or not. I do think that the U.S. getting a group that has like one of the better teams from pot 2, pot 3, and pot 4 is possible, but unlikely. And even if that were to happen and you get a group that seems sort of stacked against you, you can still get out of that group. Not to say they're 100% going to, right? Like this is possible. I want to be clear, but it is really far from likely.
To your point, Joe, I think Daryl would push back on group of death, like specifically in 2014, but that would be one of the nominees for a group of death in that competition. It was U.S., Ghana, Portugal, Germany. U.S. still gets out of that group. So, like, I think even if it were a ridiculously difficult group, the U.S. still has possibility and potential. And I also think, I hear what Ian is saying with the ELO rankings and with the potential groups. I just think it's much more likely that the U.S. were to get somebody like New Zealand as one of their group stage opponents because of the way the pots could play out. With more teams going, you are going to get some weaker teams, some weaker national teams. I also think some historically strong national teams are having a bit of a downturn. So, like Chile, Joe mentioned them previously. I think they're already out of World Cup qualifying at this point, or very close to it. So, like, I think Venezuela could go at their expense, especially with the expanded format. I'm not as worried about Venezuela as I am maybe some other national teams out there. Like Ecuador, you throw Ecuador into our group, now I'm getting a little bit nervous.
All right. Yeah, it does seem the group of death as a concept might be fairly abstract next summer. So we will see.
I think it's going to be a lot of like hipster arguing about like, actually, Like, Norway could be considered one of the best teams
Oh, I'm
on
so
the
ready.
planet.
I'm so ready for us to have that exact discussion in our previews 12 different
Is that us
times.
arguing about that then?
Yeah, 100%.
Pretty much. I mean, there's going to be some level of argument about like who is stronger, Norway or Georgia, and that is an argument that I am extremely here for. Just don't know how many other people will be. I can see Ryan tuning out already.
I think it's Georgia. Just thinking off the top of my head, but I'm willing
Odegaard
to...
and Holland, man. That's a tough one versus...
Yeah, I'm Team Norway on that one.
Vicha
for sure.
and Mamardashvili.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen. 2v2.
Good 2-on-2. Anyway, let's wrap this one up. Ian Brady, thank you very much for your question. Thank you for everybody who has submitted a question. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show if you want to chat to us and submit questions for our Listener Questions episode and much more. It's the best way to support us. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. But for now, Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed for your USMNT expertise as always, sir.
My pleasure, my friend. Thank you. It's good to have you back. And it wouldn't be a U.S. show if I didn't end it feeling optimistic about the U.S. and anxious about the U.S. all at once. And that is where we find ourselves today.
It is the dichotomy in which we live, Taylor. Thank you very much indeed. Joe Lowry, pleasure as always, sir.
Thanks, Ryan. Glad you're back.
Likewise, thank you very much. Listener, thank you for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed very shortly indeed. But for now, bye.